Happy winter solstice. Nice to be with you, and nice to see such a large congregation interested in Dhamma. Last night we started a retreat. One of the models of teaching I use a lot is I referenced this yesterday evening, is a kind of reformulation of the Four Noble Truths that Luang Por Dun presented in Thailand. Luang Por Dun was a contemporary to Luang Por Mun. So his reformulation goes like this: the mind going outside is the cause. The result of the mind going outside is suffering. The mind knowing the mind is the path. The result of the mind knowing the mind is the end of suffering. Again, the mind going outside is the cause. So we were just talking about ChatGTP and digital devices, which is an obsession we're all having now. Just think about having a digital device and always scrolling through. That's the mind going outside. It's now, its attention is absorbed into an external object. So the mind, and now that might not feel like suffering, but what it is, it's a preoccupation with the changing phenomena of life. In this sense, the feeds you're looking at, the Facebook you're looking at, whatever. The mind going outside is the cause. The result of the mind going outside is suffering. Why is that suffering? Well, it might be entertaining, right? It might be interesting. You could even be like looking at some kind of Buddhist text. But as long as our mind is always paying attention to external objects, we can never realize the silence of the objectless, the background of consciousness, the peace of the mind, nibbana, the island, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unformed. So my sense of this practice is to come back home, to the background, to the silence of the mind. So the second part of the teaching is the mind knowing the mind is the cause. The result of the mind knowing the mind is the end of suffering. So if you look at that example of someone who's digitally obsessed, you can see that they're constantly consuming, which is kama tanha, the desire for sense experience. So the person is consuming the data, but also being consumed by it, because they're now totally out there, as it were, out there. And then they're not available. And I use this language a lot. I think of availability and preoccupation. So as long as I'm preoccupied with an object, I'm preoccupied with anicca dukkha anatta, with things which change. There's nothing morally wrong about that. It is as it is, and we have to be preoccupied in certain ways, but we cannot possibly realize the silence of the mind, the peace of the mind, the stability of the mind if we're always out. The mind knowing the mind then is like, let's say you put the digital device on your counter, and then you just look at it, but you don't scroll through it. Just look at this digital device, and then you see the mind wanting to go out and reach and just check a Facebook, or let's look at WhatsApp, or whatever it is. Now that's the mind wanting to go out. But if you know that, oh, this is the feeling of wanting to go out, and you witness that, then that's the mind knowing the mind. When the mind knows the mind, then that tendency to always have to go out is now known, and you have a choice. The more addicted I am to going out all the time, the more I do that, of course, the more difficult it is. So I might look at the monk said, 5 minutes. Just watch your digital device. Just look at it. And after 2 minutes, you say, well, that was a bad idea, and you pick it up and you look at it. So even though you know that, the pull of objective experience is very, very strong. So that's a kind of interesting very obvious, I think, example, but it also applies to our emotional life. Let's say I always joke about this. I say to you, okay, next week, one of you will give this talk. We'll put all our names in a hat. It'll be a big hat. And then I will draw from the hat a name. And one of you will have to give this talk. If your name is announced, what will you be? You'll be probably anxious, because most people are afraid of giving public talks, right? So that anxiety is a condition. It's emotional data, shall we say. It arises because of causes and conditions, because of what we call maybe performance anxiety. And that's natural. It's natural to feel anxious. If the mind knows the mind, then you can see, oh, anxiety feels this way. And you bear witness to it, but you don't get reborn into the feelings of anxiety through thinking. You don't, if you go out, if the mind goes out now and grasps the anxiety, then you start thinking anxious thoughts. What am I going to say? I don't want to do this. I'm leaving town. Or you write an essay, or you do all kinds of things. Now, the mind has gone outside. The mind going outside is the cause. The result of the mind going outside is suffering. But then but then at some point you wake up, anxiety feels this way. The mind knowing the mind. It's a kind of on-off switch. So one of the things I like to try to encourage people to do is pay more attention to the background. And that's what I like the word I use. So, like if you just do this with me, I often do this. So, just listen to sound, and let the sounds come to you. Don't choose a particular sound. Just let the sounds be what they are. Now feel your hands. Just feel the tactile feeling of your hands. Listen to sound. So sound is different than tactile feeling, correct? But what is it that makes that possible? And that's awareness. So awareness is the background. So do that again. Listen to sound. And feel the hands. What is different? Tactile, sound. But what's the same in those two experiences of tactility, is that such a word? And sound? Well, it's the awareness or the background. Yeah? You see what I mean? That's always there. Peace is always there. It's not dependent on sound. Now, and I was saying this last night, so just to repeat, again, if the sound changed to something quite unpleasant, if maybe there was some construction work going on upstairs and you heard a jackhammer or something like that, and it was going through the concrete, that would be a very unpleasant sound. So that what would you tend to do? You tend to kind of go out to the sound and say, why don't they stop? We're on retreat. How could they be working when we're on retreat? So the mind would go outside with his commentary. And that would be okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. If you were the organizer of the retreat, you'd have to do that. But if you're always going out, again, so then you take a different stance and you say, well, sound is just sound. You become receptive to sound. Then as the sound gets unpleasant, you notice, there's the mind going out trying to get rid of the unpleasant sound through commentary, through judgment, through thinking. And then you come back, annoyance feels this way. So there's the sound now, but also there's the quality of sound, which is unpleasant, and you have the annoyance. This is the way the mind works. But annoyance feels this way, and you just stay with the annoyance ceases. The sound is still the same, but what you've done is you stayed with the mind knowing the mind. You kind of go back to peace. There was a very good example of this in London when Luang Por Chah was visiting us at the Hampstead Vihara. And Hampstead Vihara was the first place in England that Luang Por Sumedho landed. I was there. And Luang Por Chah came in the second year of our residence there. In the third year we left. But we were doing a meditation in the shrine room, and there were maybe like 15 people, not many people. We weren't known, Ajahn Chah wasn't known. And the street that this house was on is Haverstock Hill, very, very noisy street. I mean, really noisy, with a pub across the road and people yelling and drunk and playing rock music and buses and taxis and so on. So very, very noisy. And the windows of this room, meditation room, were, I think it was a Georgian building, but they're very, very tall, 11-foot windows. So the sound was just kind of coming through. So at the end of the meditation, and I was sitting there thinking, oh gosh, it's so noisy, and poor Ompa Chan, kind of, and then after the meditation, Lompa Cha says, you think that noise is bothering you, stop going out there and bothering the noise. That was a good teaching, huh? It was really, because the noise is just doing what noise does. It's not, its intention isn't to hurt us. So the mind going out is the cause. The result of the mind going out is suffering. Take another emotional example. You feel, let's say you say something, let's say you're in a bad mood, and you've got the flu, and someone in the family, someone at work, you haven't had much sleep, so you're really in a bad mood, and someone at work comes to you and asks for something, and you tell them, shut up. And then you walk away, oh, wrong speech, bad Buddhist, wrong speech. So then you go back home and you feel guilty. So the memory comes up, shut up, oh, bad Buddhist, I'm bad. So you feel guilt. I mean, this is an exaggeration, obviously. But, okay, so you feel guilt. Now, if you see guilt as an object, as a coarse sound might be, then you know, oh, guilt feels this way. And you can make a determination to try to practice right speech, or you can say, well, I was tired, may I be well and happy, whatever, but you know guilt is guilt. The mind, knowing the mind, then it's not a problem. It's unpleasant, but it's not really a problem. The mind going outside, then what would that be? Well, you'd feel the guilt, and then you start thinking guilty thoughts. I'm hopeless, and I'm pathetic, and what kind of a Buddhist am I? Or you'd start to maybe even like send metta to the person you insulted. May you be well, may you be well, may you be well. But actually you'd be suppressing the guilt. You can make it even more complicated. That's the mind going outside, mind going out into an object. So the khandhas, or the ayatana, different ways we talk about, I just say object myself. And I use the word stream of consciousness. So an emotion is an object in awareness. A bodily feelings, a painful knee is an object in awareness. The taste of sweetness is an object in awareness. So we have this, our life is one of these, the stream of consciousness, are constant objects are coming and going, emotional, physical. And what we tend not to notice is the background, because we're preoccupied with happiness or the stress of duties, or we're preoccupied with all kinds of cultural identities and so on. So what I recommend to people is start to touch the background by doing simple things like I think the exercise with sound has always been very effective for me. So if I'm like I do a lot of airplane trips now. You wouldn't believe how many air miles I get now. Fabulous amount of air miles. But then, there'll be the roar of the plane. It's very loud. And I say, okay, what is not the roar of the plane? So the roar of the plane is irritating. It just kind of wears you down physically. And then I use that, so that's unpleasant. And then what is it that knows that? And then I come back to the silence of the mind. Because within the noise, there's also silence. Because that's awareness. Awareness has no real quality. So the my sense of it is if you train with something, a very simple sense base like sound, and you understand that principle of this experience is in awareness, and that awareness is like the container, or that awareness is conscious space, or as I was saying, I think last night I gave the analogy of if you have a document printed on white paper, the print is black, the paper is white, the white is the background, the print is the foreground. You don't tend to notice the background when you're reading a book. You're always in the foreground, reading. The foreground could not, the print could not exist without the page. So in a sense, that's when I refer to the background, or awareness, or knowing, or consciousness, that's what I'm trying to point to, that this experience of us sitting here could not take place if there wasn't space and consciousness. Couldn't happen. We'd all be just congealed into some kind of a mass. So if you take that physical analogy, like you don't tend to notice space. When you come into the room, you kind of notice, oh, that's a spacious, but then you tend to look at who's here, what's the architecture, what are the color of the walls, or you don't notice anything. You just kind of bumble along and you sit down. So, but what would you need to do to notice space? You'd have to take your attention away from objects. Like just to notice space in a room, what do you have to do? Well, I have to stop looking at the sign or looking at the color. I have to just relax my mind, and then I notice space. Awareness is like that. Awareness has a quality of space. It's boundless. And now that isn't something you do through hours and hours of meditation, right? You can do hours and hours of meditation, but that's not, awareness is always there. So for me, the Nibbana Sutta is very, very important, and I always run it parallel to the Four Noble Truths. So in the Nibbana Sutta, and there are several, I think in the Uddana there are 4 or whatever, and the one I like is there is the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unformed. If there were not the unconditioned, the unoriginated, the unformed, the deathless, there would be no release from that which is born and dies. So when I first came, as a layman even, I was struggling with this vast teaching that we have, this fabulous teaching, because there was dependent origination and anicca dukkha anatta and parami and the Four Noble Truths. And where does it all fit together? And what helped me a lot was when Lompo Smedo introduced me to the Nibbana Sutta. And then I thought, yeah, all the teachings must be referring back to that. Because that is a statement of his liberation, his enlightenment. So for me, okay, if everything refers back to that, and it must do, because what else would he be teaching? So the Buddha realizes enlightenment. He makes that statement, and then he starts to put out a teaching trying to get us to that realization. So what is unconditioned? Well, emotions are conditioned, body's conditioned, relationships are conditioned, ice cream is conditioned. So what is unconditioned? Well, the only thing you really have is awareness, isn't it? Is awareness feminine? Is awareness 32 years old? Is awareness Latvian? Is it Malaysian? Does awareness speak Malaysian English or Canadian English? I'm just discovering Malaysian English. So you off the lights. You don't switch the lights off. It's quite fun listening to Malaysian English. You off the lights. It works. It works. Anyway, is awareness Malaysian English or It's not. It doesn't have a quality. It's not conditioned. Is awareness dependent on time? I don't think so, because like one of the ways I like to think about that is, one of the ways you could think about awareness is like presence. We all know we're here, yeah? We're not there, we're here, wherever here is. And when you go to the washroom or you go home, is presence ever absent? Like, isn't presence always there? Isn't consciousness always there? If it was ever not there, how would you ever function? How could you possibly function? So there is a sense of presence, or awareness, or witnessing, many ways, or knowing. And that is always available. Hence it's unconditioned. It's not created. It's unoriginated, unformed. So we say awareness or mindfulness is the doorway to peace. And a doorway participates of the interior and the exterior, correct? It is of both spaces. So certainly our attention has to be focused on the foreground of our experience, on emotions and our responsibilities and all the rest of it. So we need to do that. But also awareness refers to the background. It's the doorway. So we say it's the doorway to the deathless. And what I find really interesting is I like the foreground. I have fun in a monk kind of way. So I enjoy, like I'm into weaving and furniture making, and I'm not into digital stuff. I like working with my hands. I like speaking with people. I enjoy walking through the woods. So there's nothing particularly wrong about the foreground. The foreground sometimes is very annoying. We have a lot of mosquitoes, and we have ticks, and we have deer. We have a lot of little things that try to attack me and eat me in our monastery. And right now it's -12, so it's a bit chilly. So the foreground sometimes is not nice. That's the way the foreground. So without dismissing sense experience or thinking there's anything particularly wrong about sense experience, you say, well, try to live decently, but notice the peace of the mind. Notice the silence of the mind. It's always there. When you think about the Four Noble Truths and you think about tanha, kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha, what is tanha about? Isn't it always about going out? Like, kama tanha is about consuming. And what is the thing we consume the most? It's thought. Thought is like endless potato chips. You just always chomp, 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 chomp. Another thought, another worry, another plan, another worry, another. It's just like consuming. So that is the really difficult part of the meditative life. How do you witness thinking and not repress it? Because thinking is natural. If you try to repress it, you'll think more. And yet if our attention is always preoccupied with thought, we can never notice the silence of the mind. So that's kama tanha. Bhava tanha is always the sense of becoming. We were talking about digital. I was looking at his digital body watch. What do you call those? The kind of, where it tracks everything, your sleep. And I said, well, why would you do that? Why would you want to know how many hours you slept? You just sleep, don't you? So maybe, I don't know about you, but maybe that creates a bhava, I have to sleep more. Or we were talking about paces, weren't we? This device measures the number of paces you took. That sounds bad. That you're always looking at your watch. Have I got enough paces? Do I have to do another 30,000 paces this week? That sounds like bhava tanha to me. I don't know. Why don't you just walk? I'm being facetious, obviously. But in meditation, that's a real problem. The whole thing of getting some level of insight or getting some level of samadhi, or I want to be a Sotapaddi this lifetime because I don't want to be born again, and blah, blah, blah. That's all bhava. That's all ego, self, inadequate, poor little inadequate me, and I want to become something. That's all bhava tanha. That's going out. And vibhava tanha, what's that? It's the rejection of what's going on. I don't want this fear. I should be nice all the time. I don't want this sickness. Rejecting one thing and trying to get to another. And that's the activity of craving, of delusion. And yet in any given moment you can say, oh, I don't want to be here right now. And then you're here right now. You get that? You're sitting with your eccentric uncle, and he's just going on and on and on and on and on. And you've heard him, for 10 years now, eccentric uncle, Uncle Charlie, whoever he is. And you're sitting, you're thinking, Uncle Charlie, shut up, will you? Or you don't say it, but you feel it. Enough. What is he going to... Oh, this is what it feels like not to like Uncle Charlie. You could feel guilty, think, I love you, Uncle Charlie, but you don't. You're fed up with it. But if you just say to yourself, oh, this is what fed up feels like, the mind knowing the mind, you all of a sudden are back home in the territory of freedom. And then Uncle Charlie keeps talking, and then you react again. Oh, Uncle Charlie feels this way. So our training and awakening is a constant remembering of something rather than an attainment of something. You can always remember this. Attainment is different. But the thing about awareness, it's not a quality of experience. Again, you can have a noisy experience and still be aware. You can have a difficult emotional uprising and still be aware. It's not a quality of experience. It's that which... We use the word transcendence. It transcends experience because it knows experience. When the feeling of irritation arises, is awareness irritated, or does it know irritation? Does awareness take on the color of irritation, or does the mind with its emotions take on the color? Awareness has no color, it has no quality. So my recommendation is, play around with that idea if it's interesting or helpful. If it's not, then play around with other ideas, obviously. But try to use like simple sense data, like sound, and see if you can just recognize space. Consciousness is always there, and then apply that to the more difficult patterns of our emotional life and the more complex things of our life. So I think that's quite a lot to consider. Any questions? Maybe is that a kind of question thing?
Venerable Sir, when the Venerable was talking about the uncreated and unconditioned, I realized that if being at the present moment, is unconditioned and it's uncreated. How is it uncreated? For example, when the child is born, only then consciousness comes. So in that way, is it consciousness created due to birth or?
Well,
thank you.
You enter into the area of doubt and speculation, and you'll never get an answer to that. Right? I could give you an answer, but probably next week you'll ask the next monk the same question. Because there's no answer to that. But what's really important is the very nature of doubt. Now, doubt is a sankhara. It's one of the khandhas. And what intellectuals do is when they have a doubt, so and it's a valid doubt, undoubtedly. A valid doubt, undoubtedly, that's good. There's nothing wrong with that, but it puts too much power into intellect. Intellect is limited, because it's also sankhata, it's also conditioned. So the challenge for the contemplative is not so much to answer all questions, but actually to know doubt as an object and allow yourself not to know. So the mood of annoyance is more obvious. If I feel annoyed, I can say to myself, oh, annoyance is this way. But when doubt arises, and doubt is, you need doubt. I'm not saying, you just become some kind of moron where you don't think. But in the spiritual life, if you really want to enter into the silence of the mind, doubt is one of the great hindrances. So without dismissing doubt, where is doubt useful and where does it become a hindrance? So if I'm, like let's say, I've done a PhD on Buddhism, which is pretty hard to recover from, I think. but then what has my mind done? It's created questions and conclusions. Questions, conclusions, questions, conclusions. Because I've used the intellect. And the intellect is that way. It's a kind of structure which likes confidence, it likes division. So then I do my PhD, and now a doubt comes up. Now, rather than knowing doubt is a sankhara, anicca dukkha anatta, I attach to it with thinking, what does that mean, and why is that? No. Now, even if I get an answer at the end of it, because that's the way my mind has now been set up in its patterning, then another question will come up. Equally intelligent, equally important, and then I'll think, and then I might get a conclusion or not, or I might ask a monk or not. But all the time my attention is out. The mind going out is the cause, the result of the mind going out is suffering. So in the classic way of say, in the lists we have, vicikicca or doubt is the third of the fetters, and also one of the hindrances to meditation. When you see the translations of, I think in the Samyojana, the third fetter, the way the commentators say is, you no longer have any doubt about the Buddhist teaching. I don't agree with that, because I think you should doubt the Buddhist teaching. You should question, you should look, you should inquire. I take it more, you don't understand that doubt is anicca dukkha anatta, that it's a condition, that it's a sankhara, and knowing when to use doubt and when not to use doubt. Does that make sense? It's a very important question, actually, because this is one of the areas, like, we're probably all really, we're smart people. You know how to use computers, you probably all have tertiary education, so we use analysis a lot. And if you think about it, if you were on a computer for 12 hours today, analyzing things, thinking about, we're overly analytical centered. We're not agriculturalists now who are with the land and exhausted by working in the land. So one of the things, and this isn't about doubt so much, but it is about the intellectual quality of our cultures, is that I really think we need to come down to the heart more, down to this area, down to loving kindness and the Brahma Viharas, and actually feel that area more. Because their default mechanism is thinking, doubting, analyzing, and so on. So one of the things I try to do is just literally, when there's a lot of thought going on, I just bring my attention through the throat, feel the throat, bring it down to the heart, and just try to stay there, using imagery or something like that. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Venerable.
Okay.
Moin Long Po. Thank you for the Dhamma talk earlier. Now, besides just being with the awareness to know the desire mind, because the desire mind tells us these lies, right? That if I do this, then I'll be happy. If I get this, then I'll be happy. Sometimes when I just stick with the awareness, I find it not enough to counteract it or to calm down. I was thinking, or I'm trying to get a refresher on how should I reflect on contentment to help boost the awareness.
Right. Good question, yeah. Probably we're all asking that one, aren't we? A similar kind of question. I think body awareness is very important. That, well, first of all, remember that practice takes time. So, let's say I've been weaving rugs recently, the last 2 years. And it's taken a long time to get confidence. And I don't notice how I become confident. I just become confident through the doing. So I fumble around with the warp, and I look at a book, I look at YouTube. How do you do this? But I keep trying. Then I get a glimmer of light. Oh, I get it. That's the way it works. And then I keep trying until one day I have more confidence. So I think that's important to realize that in cultivation, it does take a long time to cultivate skillful habits, skillful ways of attention. So the fact that you are making this intention now is going to be a good result 10 years down the road. Because you're sincere, you realize the delusions of craving, and now you're thinking, how do I do it? So just the very fact that you're asking that question means you're going to be noticing more how to do it. You'll be more aware of the very, very problem, which is half the battle, I think. So what would the strategies be? Well, right thinking is one of the strategies. So you have some insight around craving and its deluding nature. So that's what we call samadhi. You have right understanding around that area. So from that you develop a language to help you remember that insight. So the language might be a mantra. Might be like, I'll give you a coarse example. I have a friend, and she had a very rough childhood, and then she had problems of addiction from that rough childhood, a lot of food issues, and then she had therapy, and so she was getting through it. But whenever she started to go down psychologically, she'd go to the fridge and start eating a tub of ice cream or something to damp down the depression. So then she figured out, well, how can I do this? So she put a sign on her fridge. The answer isn't in here. Which I thought was really skillful. So she stopped the mind there. So how can you somehow prevent the compulsive nature of desire? I would suggest fasting. Not on food, but on anything you really like to do. So it might be digital fasting for half a day. Or it might be shopping fasting for a week. Or it might be, whatever you want. But actually do without, but not in a severe way, not as a judgmental way, but in the fasting, in the not doing, then you can see the desire of wanting to do. So you set up a strategy of limitations and boundaries for yourself, which you say very loudly to yourself. So we call that adhitthana, making it a determination. But it's not like super ascetic. It's just to heighten your awareness of the distracting nature of desire. And that's how monasticism works. We have limited outgoing, and we watch within those boundaries. So let's say you decided that one area of your distraction is you're obsessed with badminton. Can one be obsessed with badminton? I'm not sure. Or sport, So you're always just watching sport all the time, something like that. You think, well, that's really, I think I'll just do without sport for 6 hours. This is a rough example. So then you wake up in the morning, you make your adhitthana, and then after 10 minutes, of course, you want to see what the sports scores are. And then you've made a determination, so then you can see desire. Now you see desire wanting to go out, but you've got a boundary that you've put on yourself as a training, as an interesting training. So then you see, the desire to go out is suffering, and you're just patient with it. And then after 10 minutes, you feel the desire, and you say, that was a stupid adhitthana, and you watch the the sport. And then you start again the next day. Okay, no, this is serious. So you play around with desire. You try to become intelligent of it rather than just being very judgmental. Because these are desire bodies. They are, that's their nature. And culture is consumer culture. It's, they have the best psychologists working on your mind so that you buy their stuff or whatever. So you realize you're up against a kind of pretty big thing. So I would just take pieces, like a lot of people do the 8 precepts for one day of the week. Or they'll just give something up. But always with the idea of not repressing, but understanding. You can kind of give up something out of some kind of willpower, but that's not intelligent. That's just willpower. But if it's intelligent, you kind of, I see how that works. And I mean, retreats are very good. If you can, I realize people have work and so on, but like a longer period of meditation where you are really fasting, as it were, on distraction, you get a sense of a stronger inner silence. Finally, I would say, if possible, a strong morning meditation. A really strong morning meditation helps a lot in that way. And morning meditation means you need a good night's sleep. It means you have to be boring. Go to sleep at 9 o'clock, some ridiculous hour, 9:30, and get up early and do some serious practice, at times when everyone is dead to the world. I realize very few people can do that, but that is a very powerful source of going to that which is non-desire. Because if you can fulfill your heart with happiness rather than just limitation, if you can fulfill your heart, you don't want things as much. So if in meditation you develop the Brahma Viharas, or you practice generosity, all those things which really help, which really make you happy, then the need for distractions is less and less and less. But again, I think the most important thing is your question and your integrity and your intelligence to say, okay, how do I do this? How do I live a life which is less distracting? And then you develop your own ways. You're halfway there. Okay?
Okay, thank you, Luang Po.
Good morning, Venerable. I have a question on the desire of survival and self-protection, and that cause when I meet situation of injustice or bully, I often spend a lot of time decide what action to take. So the first action will be the survival instinct, where I will fight back, I will stop people bullying me, or I have to fight for the injustice. But by doing that, I realize there's a lot of suffering. I might need to, say, go to take action, law action, or protect myself, or confront to that person. Then a lot of anger and adversity. I must say, I haven't had the wisdom to do all these things wisely without create more bad sankhara. So then I will say to myself, if I haven't got this wisdom, is it better that I accept all this injustice or bully could just be my sankhara, and I should just accept that and keep quiet by not creating more bad sankhara?
I wouldn't allow people to bully you. It's not good for them and not good for you. So I'd say take up karate. Mental karate.
Yeah. No, yeah.
I would, I live a really benign life, so rarely, I don't get that. But I would say the bully, from my little understanding of it, the bully feeds on fear and power. And if you are fearful of them, then they tend to bully more because they know they can get away with it. You probably have more experience than me, but if you can call them on it, then they're more cautious because they know they can't get away with it. So there is something about standing up to a bully. If the bully is going to punch you in the head, then you run, right? So you have to be careful of your own physical well-being. But then I guess you'd have to try to use that as your meditation. That very confrontation would become your meditation object experience because it's there in your life. Obviously, if you can get a new job, a new relationship, a new country, whatever the magnitude of the bullying is, you try to do the best you can environmentally. But if that's not available, and you're like, there's also like going, like if it's physical abuse, then obviously you go to the law. So leaving aside all those things, let's say it's a work situation and the person has more power or whatever, then that has to be your practice. So as the bullying's taking place, you're really trying to center yourself in yourself and seeing how this is affecting you. Okay, this is what it feels like to be oppressed, which doesn't mean that you don't say enough. You can do that, but you're kind of trying to get your center within this barrage of abuse. I don't know if I'm portraying it correctly, because if you can't stay centered and then you can come from a strong place, then the bully has less power than you. But you do then, the result is that you have an echo in your mind of the violence, the language, and then it's very important actually to meditate and try to work off the toxic nature of that encounter. It's obviously very, very toxic. And if you could not have that encounter, you just, try to not to have it as much as possible. But if it's there and it's happening, then somehow that is your practice. And to say it's just my karma, right? I have to accept it, I think it's too passive. It's also your karma that you're strong. It's also your karma that you're smart. And I mean, you have the integrity to deal with that. I've only had like a couple of situations where I've been bullied as a monk. And for me, I could see it was the bully could get my fear response. Now, this was a monastic situation, so it was kind of passive-aggressive behavior going on. And I just had to watch I wasn't handling it well. I'd either yell back at the guy or I'd be apologetic, but I knew I wasn't coming from the right place. So I kept watching and I said, oh, it's the fear. This guy's got my fear button. And bullies are like that. They know how to manipulate. So his language and he knew how to, he was a monk. A deluded monk. And really surprised me, but he knew how to play the game. So it took me a couple of weeks to figure this out. Wow, why can't I just, and then I saw the fear. And then in the interaction, I just watched the fear. Okay, that's it. Okay, I got it. And it took like a couple of interactions when I figured it out. And then I spoke, the third time I just spoke through the fear. And he knew that I knew. He couldn't do that anymore. And then 2 days later, asked him to leave the monastery because he was bad. He was a really toxic monk. But I had to work that through first because I knew if I didn't work it through, I wouldn't understand myself. I mean, it's a different situation. But for me, it was that he had my fear button. He knew how to manipulate that in some kind of a way. So it was very liberating in that way. But I knew as a human being, I had a responsibility to the monastery. This guy's really off. He needs to. And what happened? It shook him up. And it shook him up so much. Oh wow, I really lost it. So he started to learn about that. Think of it more that if they are oppressing you, they're creating bad karma. So by you punching him in the nose, it helps them. Not physically, but by you stopping it, actually, you're helping in their delusion. They might not know it, but they're not really creating very good karma. So the idea that we should be tolerant is not an idea of that we should tolerate injustice. That's not it. In a monastery, if someone breaks the rules, we call them. They can't say, oh, it's anatta, or that we're being intolerant. No, this is the rule. If you're going to live here, you live by this rule, by right speech. You can't. So the Vinaya is very strict that way. So tolerance is within social justice. that kind of a thing. So yeah, be careful of that idealism. I think many Buddhists think that metta, the practice of metta, means you accept the ignorance of people. But no, I think wisdom also says, no, this is wrong. Social justice is very, very important. And you're helping others in that situation. Others are afraid. Yeah, exactly. Do karate. But, you work situations, you get someone has this power imbalances that we have in life. So I think, again, going home and doing something, doing some yoga, going running, going for a walk, doing some sitting meditation, releasing all that stress is terribly important. Terribly important. Good luck.
How do you differentiate between nibbida, disenchantment, with a general sense of boredom? Boredom that we feel, that we need to consume through our five senses to fill up the holes as we live.
So what's the difference between nibbida and boredom? Boredom being the need to always distract, correct? That's the question? Yeah? Well, when you know boredom as an object, then what's the problem with boredom? It's the thinking. So you feel bored, and rather than saying boredom feels like this, you start to look around for something which is not boring. And that might be through thought, it might be looking at people, looking at your watch, or whatever. So there isn't awareness of boredom as an object. You know you're bored, but you don't see boredom as an object, you're the subject. And it's very quick. You get bored with a Dhamma talk and and right away you're born as a boring person. Not really. You're born into boredom. But when you have enough mindfulness, like Luang Por would say, when you listen to a Dhamma talk, listen from here. So, like you listen to a Dhamma talk and then your mind starts to feel bored. Oh, I've heard that again. Oh, five khandhas. If I hear the 5 khandhas again, I don't know. That's boredom, right? And you say, oh, boredom feels this way. The mind knowing the mind. Where nibbida is, for me, it's the basic realization that you cannot find the unconditioned in a condition. Trying to find the unconditioned in the condition is like trying to find the ice cream cone in the oven. You're just looking in the wrong place. So that to me is the basic move of Buddhist renunciation. It's not about shaving your head and not enjoying life. It's just, if you're interested in the Nibbana Sutta, if you're interested in the unconditioned, the uncreated, unoriginal, unformed, you cannot be searching for it in the conditioned. And the mind going out is seeking something in the conditioned, which is about happiness. So happiness is okay. You like milk in your coffee or you like sugar in your coffee. There's nothing wrong with that. Natural. But it's not, milk in your coffee or sugar in your coffee is not Nibbana, right? It's just pleasant or unpleasant. So you realize, okay, where do you look if you're interested in that spiritual dimension of your life without dismissing the other? You can still enjoy life. And then nibbida, I guess, becomes more and more profound. So the need for distraction as the heavy tanhas begin to be witnessed and liberated from the mind, then more and more the mind has this incredible fulfillment in the heart because it has a lot of love, there's peace, all those things, and the distractions of the world, why? Why make the mind coarse with distraction? Why do that? But to me, it's that basic understanding that you cannot find the unconditioned in the conditioned. Yeah? Sorry I made fun of your watch. You're okay, you'll recover, right?
Okay, brother. Thank you, sir.
Brothers and sisters in the Dharma, let us show our gratitude and appreciation to Luang Por by saying sadhu 3 times together. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.